Hi and welcome to October 2021 Patreon rewards video. So let's get started here. So this month, not nearly as much as I did last time. But I did get some work done this month. So let's talk about it. First thing, I kind of started thumbnailing out the next comic strip, even though I kind of want to take a break from it. So what happens is that sometimes I get into a situation where I'm not sure what I should be working on, what I should draw. And whenever that happens, when I'm not inspired to do like some kind of illustration of some kind, I default to working on my comic, which is the whole reason why I've done it. I've written it. So in case there's any downtime, in case I don't have any ideas as to what to work on, there's always something to work on. And in this case, it's the comic strip. So that's what I did. I started thumbnailing my comic strip. So here's the script. So this is the method that I tend to work in when I was working on paper scripts. When I did comics, when I do storyboards, what I tend to do is when I have the script, I have it physical, and this is when it's physical. But apparently, well, this is digital. What I do is I actually draw on the script, and I start thumbnailing out my ideas on the script. So, and then I designate what area of the script goes to what little doodle. And I break up the shots that way, and then once I have this, then I go in, and when it's a comic, I do a separate sketch of how the page is going to be laid out based on my little thumbnails. So this is the preliminary idea for the comic strip. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels in this one, and that's going to be it. So, and here's a throwaway idea. I decided to go better with this shot here instead of that, but that's how I tend to work out my ideas at first, and then from there I will refine all these ideas and put in the dialogue and all that other stuff. So that's the thumbnailing. So I did that, and then this is as far as I got because I didn't really want to do a comic right now. I'm kind of in the mood to do some illustrations, so that's what I'm actually doing now. So this here is an experiment. So I in the previous rewards package, I did a painting of a man's face. It was actually an experiment with the oil brush. I wanted to do a portrait, and I wanted to test out the oil brush on Clip Studio Paint. I took that and I did this, and this is an experiment that I did because I want to paint an angel, right? Like I'm thinking about how do I paint an angel? And the problem is that angels are incorporeal beings, right? They don't have bodies, and they don't necessarily have wings, right? Like they're incorporeal, and if you look at any kind of biblical thing, either they're really abstract things like eyeballs with wings. Well, I mean, so let me retract my statement as they don't have wings, because some of them have a lot of wings. But in general, they're not the way that angels are described in the Bible. They're not always pretty humans with wings. They're like these weird abstract creatures with just wings and eyeballs, or wheels spinning in wheels, and just weird stuff. So the problem is that when you're trying to do something like a painting where like a human being is interacting, and let me retract that too. There are in the Old Testament there's places in there where angels take human form, so they just look like people, right? So it's either they just look like people, or they're really weird abstract things. So if they just look like people, how do you know they're angels? If you don't put wings on them and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking, they're going to look like ghosts. In the Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien kind of got around this issue with the Nazgul, in that the Nazgul no longer had corporeal form, right? That you couldn't see them. They were just wraiths, right? And that's kind of what angels are. They're just kind of wraiths. They're just kind of ghosts. They're just kind of, they're spirits. So Tolkien got around that with putting black cloaks on the ring wraiths. And that's what gave them form. But inside, there was nothing inside. So that's really kind of what I'm going to end up having to do, is like just make white ring wraiths, white Nazgul, like they're just incorporeal spirits with cloaks. But at the same time, I wanted to see how is it that you can make them pure looking? How can you make them glow? How can you do? There's the movies, the prophecy movies where it's all about angels and stuff. They're kind of annoying because the angels are very typical, and the theology is kind of all whacked out and weird. But that's the whole point. The drama, you have to kind of mess up the theology in order to have any kind of drama with angels. But there is there's the original 3 prophecy movies, and then there's two auxiliary prophecy movies that they're newer ones. And one of the things that they did in the latest 2 prophecy movies, there was an angel in that movie that didn't take corporeal form, and he was in angelic form, I guess, incorporeal. They were, and they, what they did was really a really cool effect where he was transparent except for his shadow, which was translucent and glowing, and it was a really interesting effect. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I could do something like that. So this was my attempt. So I don't know if it's any. So this is just a test. This is I don't even know if it's going to work or not. But that's kind of my attempt at doing that. So sorry about that big long-winded thing, but this is what that is. This is the whole point of the video, is to explain the stuff that I'm doing, right? This is a sketch from a video that I recorded on drapery, which as of the time of this recording, it hasn't dropped yet, but it will. All right, so this month's postcard, I did do a recording, and again, as of the time of this recording, it hasn't dropped yet, but I will show you the process of making this. But here it is. So, and this is going to go to one of you patrons, and the person who won this, I wrote it down here, is because it's not really the person's name. Siege, you won this. I looked up, made sure that your actual real name was there and that you have an address, and so yeah, I'm going to send it to you. So Siege, congratulations. This is the postcard. I really like the way this turned out, and as I say in the video, one of the things that I'm going to start experimenting with is silhouetting clothes moving forward, just to give the paintings a more graphic look to them. So, but every patron is going to get this digital version of high-res digital version of the postcard. So you're gonna see you and again the video process of this is gonna be dropping soon publicly. All patrons, however, can see this already. It's all the videos that I record that I don't publish publicly right away. All the patrons can see them early. I think there's like there's 5 videos on Patreon that you could watch that are not in my YouTube channel yet, published on my YouTube channel yet. All right, so this is Sketchbook Sketches for my one of the finished illustrations that I did. I was working on an illustration for Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas is well, I'll talk about Aquinas in a second, but these are my sketches and doodles for that. I also have a sketch here that is going to be probably Saint Dominic, and here's one of Saint Francis. They're just ideas that I really quickly scribbled down. They don't look like anything here, but they will be fleshed out soon if I work on them. Here, these sketches here are me trying to design a face for Aquinas. Here is me trying to solve the problem of the pose for the drawing. Here's the composition of the drawing. Notice that he's looking 3/4 here and he's looking 3/4 here. And then here I decided to make him look straight on. And so these are all just explorations. And here is some more. This I ended up drawing after the fact when I started drawing the thing, because some things weren't quite working out. So I did a little bit of shape messing around with these little tiny thumbnails. This beautiful little guy here, he's actually based on a sketch that I drew in another sketchbook. But there is a series of paintings that I am going to eventually do. And he's going to be present in basically everything. So I'm trying to design Death, the Grim Reaper, and I wanted him to look very, very creepy, right? So I have had sketches in previous sketchbooks where I had come up with this kind of skull-looking creature. And I really, really liked it. I think it was appropriately creepy. So this is actually the bottom part of this skull is the skull of a rodent. And then the rest, I just decided no eyeballs and a weird shape for the skull. So I just wanted Death not to look appealing. With a little flame floating over his head. And here's inside the body. I was trying to work out what his actual body is doing underneath the cloak. And then here's more, just trying to solve the cloak. And I think this is see how this, I didn't like the hood. The hood's just not working for me. And then I decided to have the hood drape over his head and cover his head. And I think that works better. And then I worked out the robe here. So here's my little Death. The only thing I haven't done is figured out what I want the scythe to look like. So I'll work on the scythe, and then I have to think about the hands, whether or not I want them to be skeleton hands or just rotting corpse hands. Probably rotting corpse hands, because I like I want to actually draw skin. St. Augustine. All right, so I have 2 versions of St. Augustine. I'm going to flip back and forth between them. See, here we go. Here, this one is different than this one. So this, I'm going to talk about this one first. This is the original version of St. Augustine that I drew. And St. Augustine. And you saw the sketch in last month's video, and I said that I was going to talk about him in this video, so now I'm going to do that. St. Augustine is a a Catholic saint who was born around 300 AD and had a very, very promiscuous life. He traveled, but at the same time, he was a person who went around the modern world of his time, which was ancient Rome. He was a Roman citizen. He was born a Roman citizen, and he was able to travel all around the world. And he was born in Algeria, at what now is called Algeria, Africa. This is one of the problems that I had when I was reading about his origin. I read Algeria, Africa, and my brain went Sub-Saharan African. Okay, and that is just part of my ignorance. But in any case, he was an African who traveled all around the Roman world seeking truth, right? So he was enamored with philosophy and looking for wisdom. So he was looking for wisdom in all the places that he possibly could, and he interviewed and went to all the places in all the known world of his time where the wisest people were. And he learned from everyone that he possibly could. And what ended up happening was that he was horrendously disappointed with just about everybody he met. Now, his mother was a Catholic, and she wanted, and his father was a pagan, and his mother really wanted him to become Christian. And so she hounded him. Her name was Monica, Saint Monica, and she hounded him everywhere. She followed him everywhere. Like, she was just like the biggest pain in the neck mother ever. But at the same time, she was constantly praying for him. She was constantly chasing after him, trying to get him to be a better man. St. Augustine had a relationship with a woman. He didn't marry her, but he had a kid with her. And I think somebody said, or I read, that one of the reasons why he never married her was because at the time, in the situation, in the culture that he was in, she was low-born and he was Roman, and something about the social situation didn't allow him to get married to her. It's very weird. It was an odd social time, but that's just the way it was. But it was really interesting. He also said that he read the Bible to try to find wisdom and found it awful and uninspiring and unpoetic, because he was reading people like Cicero and people like that, like authors that had beautiful prose, and he went to the Bible looking for the beauty and found none of it. And he couldn't understand the Bible at all. And he just said, I don't know what the heck, whatever. And then he left, right? Like he didn't bother with Christianity. But there was like the reason we know anything about him is because he wrote a book called The Confessions, which is an autobiographical book about his own life. And that is why I have him writing a book, because that is him writing down his confessions. He also, eventually he met a man by the name of Ambrose, Bishop Ambrose of, I forgot what city he was a bishop of, Milan, Ambrose of Milan. And because he was disappointed with all the wisest people that he met of the world, like the people who had the most esteem, he was so disappointed. He just kept on searching, and he ended up meeting St. Ambrose. And St. Ambrose was a really very intelligent, very saintly person, very giving, very loving, very wise. And he was the one that was able to explain to Augustine, who was basically a Platonist. Augustine was a philosopher at a very high intelligent level, and he was very, very heavily influenced by Plato, and he was able to question in the Socratic method people like Ambrose to see if he was in any way, shape, or form wise, and discovered him to be so, and was utterly convinced by all the answers that Ambrose gave, and by the way that he lived his own life. Right, so a double whammy of saintly living and wise teaching led him to Christianity, and he ended up converting to Catholicism, and Ambrose showed him what it was that he didn't get when he first read the Bible and the Old Testament and the New Testament stuff. He showed Augustine that he was looking at the Bible in the wrong way. He wasn't reading it in a way that he wasn't getting anything out of it because he wasn't approaching it correctly. And it's fascinating because if you read the Confessions, which I have a few times, you can see how Augustine ended up reading Scripture, and it's really interesting. If you read any of his exegesis of Scripture, it's very profound and very interesting. And he wrote so much after that he influenced Catholicism to this day. Like all his writings still to this day influence Catholic theology, because he was such a rational, reasonable guy with the foundations of Socrates and Plato under his belt. He was able to view and understand and think and argue things in a very logical, rational way. And then so his writings still are logical and rational to this day, and you could read his stuff and be very influenced and very fed by the wisdom of St. Augustine. During his lifetime is when Rome was sacked and it fell. So the Romans at the time, all the secular and pagan Romans at the time, blamed the fall of Rome to the Christians. So what St. Augustine did was he wrote a book called The City of God, explaining why this is not the case. So I drew here a city to represent the city of God, which he wrote. One of the things that was written in Proverbs was a line that says, "My son, give me thy heart and let thy eyes keep me away." And so Augustine wrote, and I quote, he says, give me what, son, your heart when it stays with you. If you go ill, you will be drawn to toys and licentious and harmful loves. Give me, he says, your heart and let me be mine, and it will not perish. So here it is, St. Augustine holding up his heart to God. So he's giving God his heart because of his exegesis of Proverbs. And then I have this arrow, because in his Confessions he wrote, "Thou hast pierced our hearts with thy love, and we carry thy words as if it were thrust through our vitals." So that's why I gave him the sword. And this is often depicted in a lot of his work. So one of the things that, and the colors I picked for his clothes, green is earth, red, I forgot it. I think it was, man, I forgot what red was. I think it was sacredness or something. I forgot. So I drew him as a sub-Saharan African, right? He was an Algerian. Therefore, he doesn't look sub-Saharan African. Just because you're African doesn't mean you look like a sub-Saharan African. he was much more, well, looked like an Algerian. And then Algerians are slightly lighter skinned, and they don't look like sub-Saharan Africans, although they share some features, not a lot. So that's why when I posted this on Reddit, on the Catholic Reddit, boy, did I get it. People were just, why does he look black? So, and I'm like, well, because he's African. And then they just let me have it. And that's pure ignorance. I was very humbled by the education that I got because of my ignorance. So I adjusted him. So this is the adjustment. So boop. So now he looks Algerian. It didn't really all I did was lighten his skin, shrink his nose a little bit, and add less kinky hair. And that's it. That's all I did. And now he's Algerian. So it wasn't that much of a change, but I did change him because of the feedback that I got from a lot of people. And for which I am grateful, because that this really helped me understand St. Augustine even more, and I really appreciated that feedback. So that's the story of St. Augustine. Oh, by the way, did I tell you that he had a son from that lady? And that son, he ended up, after his conversion, he ended up having to leave that lady because of cultural reasons. And he never got married. He never had any other kind of relationship ever again. I think the woman was so in love with him that she never did either. She promised she wouldn't. She didn't want to. But they separated. But he kept his son with him. He stayed with his son. And his son was a teenager, and they would have these talks, and they would, and I think the books, I haven't read them, but I think maybe the books still exist to this day where they of their conversations. And the son seemed to be a very bright kid too, but eventually his son ended up dying of a sickness, which is very sad. And he talks about it in the Confessions. I highly, highly recommend reading the Confessions, because one of the many things that the Confessions do is that it, when you read it, it reads contemporary. It reads like the life of anyone that you may have known. It's strikingly contemporary. That was my reaction to it when I first went through the Confessions, was that this life for human beings, for people, isn't all that different. An ancient Roman like St. Augustine, his life isn't very different from ours. The only difference is the material and technology that was around. So that was the only thing. The culture that he was in, and the technology that he was exposed to, was the only difference. Otherwise, people are people. You hear stories about his friends who went to the Colosseum and got seduced with bloodlust from watching the gladiators. But the pressures of the people around, and everything is just so human. The way that he used to be a little kid and he used to steal peaches, I think it was peaches, and stuff like that, like just like everyday normal things, which are fantastic. And then when you read the exegesis of, say, things like Genesis, oh my gosh, like he might as well have been writing about the Big Bang and molecules and particles and things like that, because that's what he was getting out of Genesis. It's amazing. He was just a very contemporary thinking person. It was just, it's good stuff. And so, like, it's really worth listening, reading. Because the Confessions are public domain, you can find them in Vox.com. You can find the audiobooks. You can find the audiobooks on YouTube for free, like all this stuff. Or you could download the books online for free. I mean, it's public domain. This stuff doesn't, it's not copywritten. So yeah, I highly recommend the Confessions of Saint Augustine. That they're life changing books. That's what they are. What everything that he writes is very, very universal, very, very human. The connection you get with him when you hear his him talk about his life, the drama is really very, very interesting, and you could understand why he's still so influential to this day. Now we have St. Thomas Aquinas, and St. Thomas Aquinas was the guy who basically got the baton given to him from Augustine. So whereas Augustine was heavily influenced by Socrates and Plato, Aquinas was very, very influenced by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So what Aristotle did for Aquinas was it solidified a lot of ideas that that needed to be understood in a much more, even more rational way, theologically. So this painting, which I have gotten a lot of flack for, this drawing, one of the things that people had a problem with was that I drew him so fat. And the thing about Aquinas is that he was a fat guy. But this is an exaggeration, and people just got angry at me for it, right? Like they why is it fat? Oh, and they were freaking out because I over exaggerated his girth, right? But one of the reasons why his girth is the way it is because I drew a circle, and I drew a triangle. And that is the symbol of God and the Trinity. So the Trinitarian God, right? That's the symbol. A circle in a triangle engrossed in a circle is a symbol of the Trinitarian God. And then I drew Aquinas within the triangle, that's why he's got this very odd shape. And so in a way, I wanted him to be within the Trinitarian God, like he's dwelling in God, right? That's the idea. But people, they couldn't get past the fact that I drew him extremely fat. But he was a fat guy. That's one of the things. Like whenever you read about Aquinas, he was a fat guy. The dove obviously is the Holy Spirit whispering in his ear. He wrote so much that I drew this book symbolizing the amount of work he wrote. This ox here is there to represent his nickname. His nickname in school, because he was a quiet guy, was the dumb ox. So I drew a goofy looking ox over here. He's dropping a quill and an ink bottle because he's having a rapturous vision of God. And this is something that it's symbolic of a few things. But one of the things that happened to Aquinas is that he had, during Mass on the Feast of St. Nicholas, he had like this vision, and he had like an epiphany, and realized that, and this epiphany kind of like led him to understand, in a way, the mystery of God, like the overwhelming mystery, the fact that he's unfathomable, and because of that, he quit writing, and he stopped writing his magnum opus, which was the Summa Theologiae or Summa Theologica. And I'll talk about that in a second. And when his secretary said, let's keep writing, he said, no, because everything I've written is nothing but straw. So this is me drawing the straw that he saw his work being. Like his work, he had a piece of paper on his hand, and then he had an epiphany, and then boom, he drops it, and then the paper turns into straw. That's the idea behind the quill and the ink and the straw falling to the ground after he had this epiphany. He also was said that he was praying in a chapel, and somebody was passing by and overheard him speaking to Jesus, and Jesus said to him, "You have written well of me, Aquinas. What would you have of me?" And Aquinas was said to have responded, "Nothing but you, Lord." So this is him on his knees saying, "Nothing but you, Lord." So that's the intent of this drawing, and that's why his face is looking up, and that's why he's having this epiphany. This is this overwhelming joy, in his face, like he's just in God's presence. That's what it's like when you're just when you're just touched by God. Like that's the thing. Like that you just it's an incredible, overwhelming sensation. Like the consolation and the joy and the epiphany is beyond words. So that's the idea behind this expression. That's all this other stuff. So the Summa Theologica is a book that kind of is meant to summarize all of Catholic theology in a rational way, and using Socratic logic and Aristotelian language. This is something that's extremely foreign to a modern world, because we are no longer taught logic and reason in our modern world. We just assume that we're far more influenced by Enlightenment thinking. People like Hume, Kant, Descartes, Nietzsche, Sartre, Hobbes, Locke, Berkeley, people like this, who kind of abandoned Aristotle and Aristotelian thought in part because of Aristotle's horrible physics. He was horrible. His physics were horrible. His metaphysics were remarkable. So a lot of the Enlightenment thinking is trying to scientificize philosophy, trying to start with zero and then building things up, while the ancient wisdom of Socrates, it can kind of get summed up by Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," is kind of like the sort of the foundation of modern Enlightenment thinking and modernist philosophy, while someone like Socrates would have never said that. He would have said, "I am, therefore I think," right? Like you take it for granted that existence is, and then you examine existence, as opposed to denying existence exists and then trying to like justify it based off of subjective perspective, which is kind of like the postmodern thinking. Classical philosophy is much more objective based. Modern philosophy is more subjective based. Objective meaning that that something is objective that is not created in the mind first, that it exists outside the mind, like justice and truth and beauty and goodness and morals. You discover these things outside of yourself. You don't invent them. So there's like and this kind of information, this kind of education is called liberal arts. It's the liberal arts liberal arts education. And because we have no liberal arts education in our modern day schools, we don't understand people like Aquinas very well. So when you read Aquinas, it's a little difficult because he's using Aristotelian language, which assumes a lot of the reality of the world from the start. And it talks about essences, and it comes from things like the development of Platonic ideas and things like that. Platonic ideas being things that exist that are incorporeal, but they still exist, that cannot be proven scientifically or materially in any way, like justice and truth. These things can be argued logically. You could argue logically to conclude that justice exists, that you could argue logically that to conclude that truth exists, that goodness exists, that morals exist, but you cannot prove them materially because there's no color to them, they weigh nothing, you can't put them in a jar, they're not made out of particles, they're incorporeal. So you argue them using reason, and then you hold to the belief that your reason is sound, so that you believe, so that they exist, so they're based on belief. So science is a form of knowledge that is about the material world, which it assumes the knowledge that it concludes based off of experimentation of the real material world, gives you actual knowledge, which is true, but truth in itself cannot be proven scientifically. It has to be reasoned logically, with sound reason, and so therefore the very foundations of like, say, something like science is something like truth exists, truth is knowable, truth is rational, truth is reasonable, truth can be taught. Like, all these things are the foundations of science, but none of those axioms, none of those propositions can be proven scientifically. They are philosophical conclusions. Therefore, we have three forms of knowledge: math, which is numerical scientific knowledge. We have science, which is what science means. Science means sensia, which is knowledge, and it's the knowledge of the material truth. And then there's the third form of knowledge, which is often ignored, which is philosophical knowledge, and which allows us to conclude things like truth is rational, reasonable, knowable, teachable. Because there was a Greek pre-Socratic called Gorgias who actually denied all of those things. So you kind of have to be able to conclude those things, you just to even do science at all, right? Which is kind of so in a lot of ways Aquinas, because science, the scientific method, kind of developed in the Catholic Middle Ages, the foundation of the Catholic Middle Ages. And that's a whole, like, if you don't understand that, then there's plenty of books that explain who were the foundational thinkers within the medieval world that started leading to these conclusions, and why the theology of Catholicism actually led to the scientific method, as opposed to all the theologies of all the other worlds, including Greece, Islam, in the Far East, that had all the same philosophies, philosophical, that had some, like Islam and Greece, that had some of the philosophies there, and in China and Japan, where it had all the technologies there, and so and also in Islam and all the technologies. But the scientific method didn't develop there; it developed in Catholic Europe, and so why that is. And so they're really fascinating books. I've read a few that basically come to the exact same conclusion. So, but Aquinas is one of the many foundations of this sort of thing. And one of the things about the Summa is that it proposes, and in Catholic universities at the time, it was illegal to question the faith, right? Except, and I'm not saying Catholic in the Catholic world at the time. The Catholic world at the time, it was illegal to question the faith, except in universities. In universities, you could go to town and just slam it. And that is the tradition within the Catholic universities. They could slam and destroy the Catholic faith as much as possible. Like they wanted to just obliterate it in order to be able to defend it. And that is really fascinating. You never hear that unless you read these books, right? Like books on these Catholic universities and what happens in them. And one of the books that shows what that was like is the Summa, because the Summa is, again, an explanation, a logical, rational, reasonable explanation of Catholic theology by way of defending the most intelligent arguments against Catholicism. So you take any argument that would completely obliterate and argue against Catholicism, the existence of God, why evil exists, like the unreliability of the Bible, like whatever it is, like it's there in the Summa, argued in a steelman argument. By steelman, I mean that it's the best argument ever written against the faith, right? Against Catholicism. To this day, those arguments are still the best, like, right? And Aquinas answers them in a rebuttal. So it's like a debate kind of a book where you put forth the argument against, and then you sum it up, and then Aquinas answers the argument. And so it goes back, and that's the way that Catholic universities were at the time. The reason why you wanted to destroy the faith in the Catholic university is to be able to defend it. If the idea being that if there's no rational way to defend the Catholicism, it wasn't true. That was the rationale behind being able to argue against the faith within Catholic universities, was to be able to argue for the faith. And so that is, so the Summa Theologica, which again is public domain, anybody could read it, anybody could find it anywhere, you could just buy it in any bookstore, it's still around, is highly, highly, highly influential, very, to this day, like this is one of the very foundations of the way that Catholics think about theology and philosophy, and the way that they approach the rational thinking behind the faith. So that's why Aquinas is so important. That's why I drew him here, and that's what it's all about, and that's what the symbols mean. Oh, the other thing that this symbol, this drawing means, that he's inside a sun or a star, which is the light of God, right? But it's also a circle, and to me, just having that be a circle, besides being God, it's also the Eucharist, and the Eucharist is something that Aquinas had a really heavy devotion to. And I also drew a tear on him. He's tearing up. One of the reasons why I have him tearing up is because he was a very, very emotional guy. Apparently he was extremely sensitive. So I have him shedding a tear because apparently he would often cry during Mass while saying Mass. He would often break down into tears. So that's Aquinas. So we had both Augustine here and Aquinas, two amazing thinkers that I highly, highly recommend you learn more about. You read their works. But the problem with Aquinas, though, is that you really, unlike Augustine, who's very much more approachable, you could read his stuff because it's very personal and autobiographical. Aquinas is very, very mechanical. Very, very rational thought. And if you have no foundation in Aristotelian thinking and thought, you won't understand Aquinas at all. So I would recommend reading Mortimer Adler's book, Aristotle for Everyone, or listen to it. I both own the book and I own the audiobook, and I've listened to the audiobook multiple times because it's Aristotle and explaining Aristotle and the philosophy of Aristotle in modern terms. It's exactly what Aristotle says in his own writings, but with modern language that you could understand, because Aristotle was also very heavy to read. So, and then once you understand that, then you can go and read Aquinas and go, oh my gosh, wow, this guy, Smarty Pants. So, yeah. Okay, so this was the just the explanation of the drawings and the reason why I did these things. And hopefully I'm not going to get a whole lot of hate about this, because I'm talking about religious stuff, and that's always really, really tough. I try not to talk about this stuff too much because it's extremely personal, and I leave myself extremely vulnerable to attack, because this is... Yeah, so thank you for being my patron. Thank you for watching. I just wanted to remind everybody that I did create a course in case you want to be able to express yourself wherever you are, with whatever you believe, however you believe. If you want to start drawing and being able to kind of just talk about the stuff that really matters to you, but you can't draw yourself out of a paper bag, you can't draw your stick figure, you can't do anything, I did make a course for you to just get out of that hole, that fear, so that you can just start playing and start having fun and being able to express yourself. And I will leave the description to that in the description of this video. I'll leave a link. I will leave a link to that in the description of this video. So thank you so much for being a patron. Thank you for watching. Thank you for putting up with my explanations. And I hope that this has been good and interesting to you. And I will talk to you next time. All right. Bye.